بن جعفر الكاظم وعلي بن موسى الرضا ومحمد بن علي الجواد وعلي بن محمد الهادي والحسن بن علي الأسكري وحجة الله يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب العصر والزمان. عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل الله تعالى مخرجه وظهوره وجعلنا من أعوانه والأنصاره والمستشهدين بين يديه. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات، تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد. أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. I enjoin upon you and myself to have fear and piety of Allah. Briefly, in our second discussion, there is a continuing trend that is somewhat considered baffling of the condition of loneliness continuing to spread. Now, the interesting thing is, the imagination was that loneliness was a symptom of the affair of COVID that we went through, and once COVID was completed and we went back to work, we started seeing people, we could spend time, we could hug people, loneliness would go away. And it hasn't. Now, that seems kind of counterintuitive, that it makes sense that you feel lonely when you can't see people, you can't spend time with them, but now that you can see people, you can spend time with them, you can go hang out, why would loneliness continue to persist? Well, to understand this, the first thing we take a look at is what is the definition of loneliness? And loneliness isn't the description or definition that, for example, I physically don't come in contact with someone, but rather that it's a state of discomfort that a person experiences from either being alone or feeling as if they are alone. The sentiment of feeling alone is what is the essence of the true definition of loneliness. That a person, though they may be spending time around other people, they don't feel that they have the level of social connectivity or community around them, and thus they feel as if they're alone. So the reality is you can be around people, you can spend time with people, and still not feel satisfied and still feel alone. There are three types of loneliness that are discussed. One is emotional loneliness. And this loneliness is that meaningful relationships, deep-seated relationships are missing in the life of a person. I socialize, I talk to people, I say salam to people, I see them from time to time, but there's no meaning, there's no depth in that relationship, and this can create a level of loneliness. The second is what's social loneliness, which basically means a deficit in the quality of social interactions. That I may be seeing, for example, the cashiers at the store and saying, "Hi, how are you?" But there's no depth of the interaction there either. There's no meaningful association, and there's no quality in that interaction other than, "Hi, how are you?" And the answer to "Hi, how are you" in American culture is never, "Well, I'm kind of feeling a little sad today," or "I'm having a cold today." The answer is always, "Good, thanks, and you." This type of interaction is actually something American, very American. That the idea that when someone asks you, "How are you?" it's not meant to actually ask you how you are. It's meant to just be a greeting of a "Hello, how are you?" It's a standard statement. We don't want to actually hear how the person feels. It's a very American quality, and it's something we all do on a daily basis. Think about it. Every time you go and you see someone, you don't just say hello, you say, "Hey, how are you?" But I don't really want to hear that person. And this creates a sense of loneliness because there's no quality in the interaction. And a person can feel like, I have no one to speak to at this point in time, though they're talking. There's nothing there. The third level of loneliness that's discussed is what's called existential loneliness. Meaning that this is the fundamental feeling of feeling separated from people, that no one understands me. No one goes through what I'm going through. No one can know who I am and what my problems are. Meaning that I'm present in a society, I'm present in a community, but I'm still not feeling as a part of anything. I still don't feel a connection to anything. One aspect of this loneliness is the idea that it's something that a person can't come out and always tell you that this is what I'm feeling. We as a community, when we value our community, have to pay attention to one another and to look for and to notice each other and to look at the value in each other to see, is someone going through this phase? Is someone having this difficulty? There are some, for example, signs of this loneliness as well too, that how can you see when I'm looking at someone that they're going through this experience of, though they're present, They're here, but they're missing, is when I start taking a look at their behavior. And in their behavior, I start to see certain symptoms of excess. When a person, instead of enjoying communication, talking to people, starts spending the excess of his wealth through shopping, for example. They spend excess in, for example, in food. They spend excess in, for example, showers and wanting to be alone and feeling warmth through some physical contact as opposed to emotional contact. We start seeing that this idea of excessiveness in other behaviors and avoiding social contact is an indication that they're going through some level of loneliness and difficulty. Allah points to this in a very interesting way when we take a look at, for example, Surah Al-Takathur, Alhaakum al-Takathur, Hatta Zurtum al-Muqabir. That excess is what diverts you until you visit the grave. The loneliest place for a human being is the grave. And if we don't resolve our loneliness here, and we don't resolve this emotion of separation here, the grave becomes even more difficult. Meaning that the paying attention to the attribute and the symptom of loneliness and noticing it within ourselves and seeking assistance for it, or noticing in our community and paying attention to when people begin to isolate themselves, is an important element for their care and our care. That it plays an impact in our relationships and it will impact our akhirah as well too. Therefore it's something not to be ignored and something to be said, it's a problem of other people, it's not my problem. No, this is an issue when it affects a community, it affects all of us. We start by resolving this issue by paying attention to each other. Who's missing? Who doesn't come anymore? Who do we see less frequently? Who's disengaged in the community? Who's not talking to others? Who's not sitting with us anymore? And this is a reality of the culture that we live in, that this is actually happening. And the consequence of this is that if we don't catch this, the condition of that person becomes worse. Because loneliness is is a temporary condition that leads to a much bigger permanent condition of depression. And depression now has many symptoms and many health problems and many other issues that show up along with it. But it begins by loneliness and no one catching or paying attention to the fact that someone's going through a difficulty. The other thing is it destroys our community. It makes us come apart. We have, mashallah, many resources in our community. We have many people in our community. We have many great ideas in our community. But when we're not connected and paying attention to each other, we lose the benefit of the collective. We lose the benefit of working together. We lose the benefit that each individual brings to our society. Now, there are some things that if I start seeing these symptoms in myself, there are some ways that are both Islamically recommended and scientifically recommended that are beneficial to us that we can do to help someone through these problems. So there are, for example, 4 different activities that are scientifically recommended to help us when we feel lonely or we feel alone and we're not connected. The first of these is called a practice of gratitude. In a practice of gratitude, a person who's lonely often sees the problems, the difficulties, and those aspects that isolate themselves and are difficult and bad in their environment. If I start to find myself going down this hole where I just constantly am depressed or see all the difficulties in the day, one of the recommendations is start something by the aspect of gratitude, of noticing and pointing out and writing down. It's very important to write down 3 moments of gratitude in a day. 3 good things that happened to me. 3 things that are beneficial to me. 3 things that were better than I expected them to be. This aspect of gratitude is something that the Quran also emphasizes. لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ وَلَإِن كَفَرْتُمْ إِنَّ عَذَابِي لَشَدِيدٌ. That Allah is also telling us that if you are thankful, I'll give you more. And if you are ungrateful, then certainly my punishment will be severe. This aspect of promoting the concept of gratitude helps a person that when they feel more and more isolated and separated, that the use of gratitude shows them the connections and the benefits that they're receiving as part of both a community and as a part of being a good person, that there is benefit and good in them. The second aspect that's discussed is to remember that a person is unique. One of the things that can make us feel lonely is that when we look at others and we start comparing ourselves to others. And we're saying, oh, well, everybody likes Haydar and nobody likes me. Everybody wants to talk to Haydar and nobody wants to talk to me. This aspect of comparison implies that all of the things between Haydar and I are identical, and Haydar is doing more with what he has and I'm doing less. But here in the aspect of uniqueness and in remembering that no, my challenges and my difficulties are unique, my resources are unique, my process is unique, what Allah has put me through is something unique and different, is a way of realizing that no, there's no point in me comparing myself to Haydar or to Abbas or to anyone else. I need to remember that my process is going to be completely different, and therefore my benefits, my conclusions will be different as well too. The third aspect that's taken and suggested for this process of dealing with loneliness is to take account of oneself. Don't evaluate yourself against others. Evaluate yourself against the goals that I set for myself in my life. Sometimes, for example, we forget how far we've come and all of the amazing things we've accomplished. The degree I have, the house I have, this I have, that I have, that were things that I had hoped for someday. And instead, what do? We look at Haydar's house and we say, well, Haydar's house is a lot bigger than mine and he's the same age I am. Baba, my goal was never to have Haydar's house. Why am I comparing myself with Haydar today? To take account of oneself is to measure oneself against one's own responsibilities, desires, and things that I had wanted to become. Did I accomplish those goals? And then taking the time to focus on ourselves. One of the biggest things that happens in loneliness, and this is a reaction of the nafs, is that the nafs and that selfishness thinks about what I want and looks at everything with me as the epicenter of the world. But when I start to think really and I start to think about the presence of Allah, I start to think about the reality of this world and how everything is interconnected, I start realizing that my role in society, my role in community is much more than simply my desire. There has to be something more that I'm associated with, and that looking beyond oneself helps us to overcome the concept of loneliness. This is a social issue. The reason that it's worth mentioning and discussing is that there are symptoms of this. While we are a microcosm of the community and the country that we live in, the issues of our society impact us as well. And it's happening to us. After COVID, there are members of our community that showed up again that were missing. Because of the consequence of loneliness, they realized the value of being here, and they appreciated it, and they came back to us. But if we think there are people who are still missing, or there are people who were here who aren't now, it's on us to reach out to them. It's on us to be conscious of the difficulties they may be going through. It's on us to appreciate when we see them and to acknowledge when they're missing, to know that they're special and part of our community. It's not one person's job. It's not my job or your job or your job. It's all of our job. We hold each other together. And this is something really important. When you see someone who's been coming and is missing, reach out to them. I know you're busy. We're all busy. But reach out and ask the question, hey, is everything okay? I care about you. One of the important things that I tell people when I call them, they get very worried. They say, oh, sorry, Sheikh, I'm not taking attendance. I'm not taking attendance. If I'm asking about you, it's because it makes me happy to see you. I like to be with you. I like to be in your company. Telling that to our community members makes them feel like they belong here. They're not alone. We appreciate them. But if we do it with the wrong voice, it feels like now we're holding them for ransom. If you don't come, or else, I didn't see you. That's a mistake. That's going to make people run away from us as soon as they have an excuse. We want people to be here in spite of their excuses, in spite of their responsibilities. This is a voluntary community. It's not a mandatory community. There's nothing here that insists that you have to be here. We don't give out checks to anybody. If you show up and have good attendance, you'll get a check. No. Meaning each of us makes the decision to be here. Make it a positive environment so that everybody wants to be here. Make it a considerate environment that we're paying attention to each other. We miss each other. We know when someone's missing. We're happy to see each other. And this will help correct many of the sicknesses and diseases that affect the society outside, but we'll be safe because we have a healthy network. We take a look at the discussions around loneliness that are even mentioned by the Ahlul Bayt. For example, in the hadith of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, La wahshata awhasha min su'il khulq. One of the things that brings about loneliness, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, the worst of the loneliness is that which is brought on by bad character. Be careful that when we are in a part of a community, if we feel loneliness, is it because we're behaving badly? Is it that no one wants to be around us because we have no consideration or kindness for others? Imam Ali goes further and he says, Man lam yahtamilu zalala siddiqa mata wahidan. When it comes to building a community, a person who cannot overlook and endure the lapses of their friends will be lonely. We'll never have association and community. When we want to build a community, don't pay attention to the mistakes, overlook them. Allow people that they're human, nobody's perfect. And that their mistakes should not be something that keep us away from them. One of the other points that are mentioned by our master, he says, "Man khala bil ilmin lam tuhishu khalwatan." That a man who possesses intellect and knowledge is never frightened of loneliness. That this idea of knowledge and thinking and pondering over Allah's creation and existence is one of the tools that we possess to help ensure that even if we are disconnected, we realize the depth of our connection to Allah. In this we take a look and we see that a person who ponders over his relationship with Allah realizes he's never alone, should never feel loneliness, always feels the presence of Allah in his life. The amazing thing about Allah is that each one of us is the creation of Allah. Yet Allah simultaneously is aware of every difficulty and problem and good quality we go through, and Allah is intimately preparing every step of our life. One of the mistakes that we make is that we imagine, for example, and this is a Christian doctrine that was presented by St. Augustine about the idea that God is a clockworker. He set us into motion and we do whatever we want. And on the Day of Judgment then He'll come back and He'll review what we did with our life, and Allah is separate from us. Allah is not separate from us. Allah is present in every second and every moment and is with you and has customized every challenge to you and every reward specifically for you. No one else. When I ponder over and I think about the presence of Allah, when I spend time to think about how close and intimate Allah is, that everything that I'm going through, He is personally putting it in front of me, I'm not alone. I'm invested with my Creator, and my Creator is vested with me. This realization is an important realization. And one of the ways that we come to the realization of the presence of Allah is spend time with the Quran. It's to spend time with the Quran, and it will increase our relationship with Allah. And it's something each of us should take the time on a daily basis to do. This is why our fourth Imam Ali ibn al-Husayn Zainul Abidin alayhi salam would explain, and he says, even if there was not another human being on this world, if I possessed the word of Allah, the Quran with me, I would never feel lonely. Because it will continuously bring us back to the attachment with Allah. We ask Allah again by the right of this day, by the right of the Hadirin Ghaibin, that, oh Allah, forgive our sins, cover our flaws, protect us from the sicknesses of the soul, protect us from the sickness of loneliness. Oh Allah, we have gathered here with hajat by the right of the day of Friday and the mention of your Ahlul Bayt, fulfill our hajat. Oh Allah, there are those who are sick and suffering from amongst our communities, give them security and health wherever they are. Oh Allah, give aman to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Oh Allah, keep our children, our families and our community on the upright path of Islam. Hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman, make us from his upright supporters, and entitle us to the ziyarat of Imam Hussein in this world and the shifa of Imam al-Hussein in akhirah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna Allah ya'muru bil-'adli wal-ihsani wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal-baghi wal-munkari ya'idhukum la'allakum tadhakkarun. Sadaqallahu al-'aliyyul 'azim. أعوذ بالله من